Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this LinkedIn Live event about negotiating with emotion. I have the pleasure to be with you with Jordi Quoidbach. We will ask him to
Hello.
introduce himself in a moment. But first of all, let me welcome you, the listener, the one that are joining this event live, or the many others that will be watching the event on a recorded basis. So thank you for staying connected and wanting to learn more about this fascinating topic. By the way, Jordi and I were just wondering where we will be getting more people from Switzerland, where I'm based, or from Spain when Jordi is teaching. So just wondering if you could tell us from where you are connecting. And I'm pretty sure that we may ended up having people from a number of different countries. So do use the chat, by the way. If you're not familiar with StreamYard, on the right side, you have a chat box, and that's the opportunity for you to interact with us. Because at the end of the day, it's your LinkedIn Live, right? Is you're there to get the most. And if what we are covering is not exactly covering what you wanted, then drop us an email, let us know what you want. Okay, so here we have Roxana. Hello, Roxana. Very bright students from University of Lausanne. Sergio, ciao Sergio from Italy. And then we have some more people from Switzerland. And we have Daniel from Edinburgh. Hi, Daniel. Good to see you back. Last week we had a webinar about who should make the first offer in a negotiation. By the way, Daniel was there. If you missed it, drop me an email and we will find it back for you. And then we have Vlad from Germany. Hi, Vlad. Another negotiator, another passionate expert in negotiation like Sergio. So great to have also a number of experienced people that are joining us to discover a few more things about the field of negotiating with emotions. Now,
I will say hi to Vinicius. He's a former student of mine and one of the most brilliant negotiators I had in class. So
special
hi.
Fantastic, Vinicius. Perfect. Okay, great. Then thank you all for joining. And how about finding out more about our guest today? Jordi, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hi, Giuseppe. Hi, everybody. So I'm Jordi Quoidbach. I'm a professor of organizational behavior at ESADE in Barcelona, and I mainly teach negotiation. And in terms of research, I study emotion broadly, how we can, maybe better deal with our emotion, trying to understand also emotion shapes our decision, and in particular, more lately, how emotions can, get in the way or help us in negotiations.
Wow. Okay. Then, we are lucky to be able to be among the ones that can get, your latest funding of this research. So that's great. But,
Happy to share.
you just mentioned, Jordi, that the field of emotion is one of your passion. You also wrote several books on emotional competency. How did you get interested in this topic?
Well, I don't know. As far as I can remember, I've been always sort of fascinated by why some people seem to have more friends, to be more efficient in their relationships, to get more when they ask. And I remember reading books at 14, 15. Not all of them were good retrospectively, but books on the topic. I always found it fascinating. And then at the university, when I was studying psychology, I stumbled upon this notion of emotional intelligence, or I'm more comfortable with emotional competences because I think you can increase it quite a bit. And I started reading more about emotions. We can study them in the lab. What sort of individual differences in emotions predict outcomes in life, success in relationship, at work, and things like that. And then at the beginning of my PhD, I started working on this notion that can you increase it? Can you, it seems to be so wonderful to be emotionally intelligent. Can you teach that to people? And the answer is yes. So we conducted a bunch of studies and we trained people, different emotional skills. And we found that not only we could increase it among, groups of adults from students to professionals, older professionals, but also that people who went through the training were actually doing better on a bunch of other metrics. They were less stressed. They were more likely to get promoted or to get jobs. There's all kinds of indicators of success.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. I mean, we could talk about emotion, for hours. By the way, Jordi didn't mention it, but he was also chosen as one of the top professor under 40, one of the top 40 professor under 40 in the world. So we are really lucky to have him with us today. So
that was the good old days where I was under 40, though. But still the title.
Okay, now let's focus for a moment. I mean, we can talk about emotion for hours, but let's focus a bit more on the emotion and negotiation kind of field. So why is so essential to understand emotion to be an effective negotiator?
Okay, well, I think negotiations are profoundly emotional, right? So first, life is emotional. When we ping people with smartphones and we say, at random moments throughout the day, hundreds of people, thousands of people, hey, are you currently feeling any emotion and which one? 90% of the time people tell us, yes, I'm feeling something. I'm angry, I'm happy, I'm calm, but they're feeling something. If I had to ping people in the middle of the negotiation, the answer would be 100%, right? We're scared to walk into a negotiation, to ask for things. We get angry when we don't get what we want, or we get sad or disappointed. We care about the other party's feeling. We want them to like us. We don't want to hurt their feelings. We don't want them to, get madder or sad. So feelings are all over negotiations. And I think if we can learn to maybe better prepare for these emotions and manage these emotions, we can get better also at the bargaining table.
Okay, then you mentioned, manage our emotion, but how can we better manage our emotion before and during the negotiation?
Right. Okay. So first, before, I think one of the most common thing in negotiations that people don't really like it. It's anxiety provoking. We don't like to ask. We don't like to be rejected, especially when the stakes are high. You're thinking about asking something to your boss or to a loved one, and you don't want them to take it the wrong way. It's stressful. And so I think one of the first emotions to manage negotiation is our own anxieties when it comes to asking and initiating the negotiation. For that, I thought two pieces of research were, I'm going to share a few tips, but two pieces of research in general were kind of helpful to me in thinking about that. The first is that, when you ask negotiators right after a negotiation, were you too aggressive, too pushy? Do you think the other person didn't like you that much, and so forth? Most people say yes. They feel they've been annoying. Yet when you survey their partner anonymously, and you say that person you negotiated with, was that person annoying, pushy, too aggressive, too demanding? Most people say no, that person was perfectly fine. So first, I think a lot of the anxiety about being annoying and initiating a negotiation and asking is in our head more than it is real. The second piece of research that I'd like to share, because I thought it was so interesting, and comes from research from Vanessa Bonds, and it shows that when you make random requests to people on the streets, can you walk me to the train station, or can I borrow your phone for a second? All kinds of requests that researchers made. People are 2 to 3 times more likely to say yes to that request than what the asker was anticipating, right? So the asker was like, no way someone is going to walk me to the train station for 15 minutes. And yet a big chunk of people said, sure, I'll help you out. So bottom line, a lot of that fear, it might not be funded, might not be real. So that's the first thing. Now, what do you do if you're nonetheless very anxious to ask for a promotion, a raise, what have you? I think you do, the best way to manage the anxiety is the way you would manage any other sort of anxiety related to performance. So if I ask you, Giuseppe, to give a presentation to a very large audience of, super important people, how would you feel? Like, I'm guessing you probably feel anxious, right?
Yeah.
And then what would you do? Probably to feel less anxious.
Preparation. That's one thing.
Exactly.
Preparation is one of the things that certainly helps, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's obvious when you think about a presentation or a concert, you're a singer. Of course, you're going to rehearse, or you're an actor. But negotiation is the same thing. The more you're going to prepare and role play this important raise negotiation you want to bring up to your boss, and and with different people and with different scenarios, the better off you're going to be when you're actually in the negotiation, right? So preparation lowers anxiety, because anxiety is related to things that we're sort of uncertain of. And if you remove some uncertainty, you feel less anxious. That's the first thing. The second thing you can do comes from research on reappraisal that shows that people tend to do better when they sort of change in their mind their interpretation of their anxiety. And instead of thinking, oh my God, I'm so stressed, they change it to, oh my God, I'm so excited. It might sound like a cheap trick, but there's actually quite a bit of research that shows that if you reframe anxiety as, oh, this is my buddy telling me it's an exciting, important moment, you actually do better and perform better. So these are two things you can do before, the negotiation phase if you feel anxious.
Okay, so just before we move, we also said that we were going to talk about what you do during the negotiation. But let's comment a bit more about this reframing element, because it is a powerful thing, right? You tell different words to yourself. Let's say you formulate different emotion to yourself, and this helps you to feel different emotions.
So there's research that suggests that it does indeed help people maybe not feel profoundly different emotions, but actually not being so debilitated by the stress, right? Because now they see the stress as a positive thing. And I think the broader picture is emotions are useful, and some of them are unpleasant. Anxiety is not pleasant, sadness is not pleasant, but they're like really useful devices that our brain has come up with to tell us, hey, stop, there's something important here, or there's something you shouldn't mess up, or mess up. And so I think if we reframe and change the way we think about emotions, and instead of saying, oh my God, I shouldn't feel stressed, I shouldn't feel anxious, that's bad, we say, like, look, it's normal. That's what the brain is designed for. It's to anticipate all kinds of problems. So you say, thank you, brain, for bringing this to my attention, and I'm going to use this emotional force, to actually get the job done. And here, I notice I'm so anxious. That's a sign that I'm really excited about this issue, that I really need to get it right. This is a helpful thought, I think.
Perfect. Then we had the second part of the question. You said, okay,
Sure.
This is how you manage your emotion before the negotiation. Now, how about during the negotiation?
Right. So, during the negotiation, I think stress will typically quickly transform into anger, especially if you're unprepared, right? So you came and you've prepared your argument, you know what you want, and then you get a no. Sorry, we can't, or sorry, we don't think you performed that well, and you might feel angry. So I think during the negotiation, the main emotion that we have to deal with often is like frustration, anger. We feel it's unfair. We're not treated the way we should be treated, and so forth. To me, the best advice there is to remember that you shouldn't get, mad. You shouldn't get sad or scared. You should get what you want. And so I think what you want to do whenever you feel like you're experiencing some emotion is probably take a step back. Whatever it works for you, right? It could be counting backwards from 1,000 by 7 increments. Whatever, you have some sort of plan so that you don't react immediately emotionally, but you give yourself the time to sort of go down. Because we know from research that anger doesn't get very far. So I mean, sometimes you get what you want by being angry, but most of the time you destroy value. You just consider a narrow set of options, and it just shrinks the pie when you're in anger mode, and it run the risk that your counterpart will also feel angry, and you escalate the conflict, and it leads nowhere. So first advice, take a step back.
Okay, but listen, I love this idea of counting. Okay, it's a classic right of negotiation. If we go back to getting past no,
Yes.
count to 10, count to 100, etc., etc. But I love this idea of count backwards by 7, and I wonder whether there is a connection with Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, System 1 System 2. So by making something which is more complicated, then you activate more the rational thought and you decrease the emotional and gut reaction. Is that the theory behind this counting backwards by 7?
Exactly. So the idea is that it's actually cognitively demanding, right? It needs you to fully engage all the resources of your prefrontal cortex, and so there's just less room in your working memory for getting angrier. So that exactly, that's the idea. I think counting to 10. I mean, some research suggests it helps some people. It doesn't help other people, but whatever works for you, but do something, whether it's breathing or it's counting backward, that sort of separate you from your gut reaction. Another strategy that comes from more the mindfulness field and practice would be to tell yourself, I notice I'm experiencing anger, frustration, whatever. So there's two parts. The one is I notice I'm experiencing. So it's not like I'm angry and that's all I am. No, I can see myself from the top, and I notice there's stuff happening in my body. I don't need to follow these things. I just notice it. And second is to put a name on your emotion, because there's research showing that if you label feelings, they're already tamed a little bit. So that's another thing. I think at the
just
end of
on
the
this
day,
one, I was just Jordi. On this one, I read an article, some research being done with people in a MRI scan machine, and when an emotion is being named, then the mental activity in the brain reduces by 50%. So there is a calming emotion. By the simple fact of mentioning the emotion, then the brain calms down and the activity in the brain decreases by 50%. So it seems to be also showing up, let's say, in the MRI scan machine, this the positive effect of
labeling.
naming
There's
the emotion.
many studies indeed show that whether it's in the scanner or without the scanner, that it has a emotion regulation properties already to put a name on things, right? Because now that you have a name for a concept, you can do something about it more easily than if you're just overwhelmed by your feelings. Part of emotional intelligence training is really, and to me, one of the things that is the most efficient in these training is to expand people's vocabulary for emotion, right? So when you're very little, you just feel good or you feel bad, and then as we learn, we have more words for our feelings. It's like colors, and it's like a painter. The more colors you know, the better off you are coming up with, with the masterful composition. Well, for emotion, it's the same thing. The more words I know, the better off I can like pinpoint exactly what I'm feeling, and so I can do something about it that is appropriate.
Yeah, just a small tip on this one. Something that I did with my children is, and also, children are bilingual now, are quadrilingual, and but of course, mom was speaking French, dad was speaking Italian. So one of the things that I got, and it's an idea that can be applicable also to our readers, is I got a list of emotions in Italian, classified in some way, and as the children were 5, 6, 8, whatever, then we will be commenting on our day and trying to pick emotion looking at this list. And this helped my children not only to broaden their Italian vocabulary, but most important, to broaden their access to emotions. So I think that's something that I didn't, as a child, I was more like good and bad, it took me a long time until I went out of the stage. So I didn't want my daughters to fall into the same trap. So that's something that, indeed, is a powerful technique. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I think a lot of these techniques, it's also good to sort of make a plan in advance. So before you walk into a negotiation, things are going to get probably emotional, right? So think about an athlete. An athlete, when they prepare for a race, they typically like mentally rehearse every movement they're going to do, every aspect of the race. But the best athlete would tell you, they also mentally prepare for all kinds of things that could go wrong, right? What if I lose my shoe? What if I start wrong? And what would I do? How would I recover? I think we want to do this for a negotiation too. It's great to role play with your friends, and you ask for your raise and you get it and you feel more confident. But you also want to prepare for all kinds of scenarios where people are being douche with you, right? Or people are not getting you the answer you expect. How do you react then? And if you make plans about like, well, if they start being aggressive with me, I will do this, whatever it is. If then plans, you're more likely to stick to your plan if you have one, right? And so when the conversation doesn't go the way you had planned and doesn't go right, no, you fall back to what you've prepared. And if you've prepared something like counting backward or whatever you will be less likely to get emotional, and so more likely to get what you want.
Yeah. I think, a couple of things that I used, in my negotiator career is taking a deep breath. That's something that worked for me, may work for other people. Maybe asking a question rather than making a statement, right? In the sense that rather than if you start making a statement, then asking a question is also a way to give yourself more time and to diffuse emotion. Then, of course, as part of the preparation, also recognizing that it may be a tactic, right? It may be a tactic. If you negotiate, for instance, with big supermarket chains, like Carrefour or Auchan or Tesco, they may, by default, use aggressive statement, let you wait for half an hour, and give extreme demands, etc. So then, anticipating the challenge is indeed something that may be beneficial, let's say, to deal with this more respect, right? Then
exactly. So don't fall for that trap, right? They might be using anger tactically. I agree, but I think you never win by falling for that trap. So exactly. You take a step back. You say,
if you recognize,
it sounds like you're very angry here, and then silence.
Yeah, exactly.
And let them. If they're really angry, you'll notice.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe calling for a break. calling for a coffee break, maybe also listen, this is new evidence, something that we had not planned in advance, because you're upset. I'm thinking about a real life situation, right? When we had to prepare the agenda with the supplier, and he started the meeting asking for a 25% price increase. And there was not quite what we had planned for this meeting. And say, okay, listen, this is something that's maybe, let's call for a break. And then, that's it. This enables, to realign with the team, to calm down the emotion, to avoid, that you make some gut reaction, that you may complain later. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. You want to help them save face as much as you can, right? Because if you act like you're offended 25%, but you guys are nuts, we can never agree to that. Are you joking? All these things. It makes it even harder for them to take it back now, because either they got caught lying and nobody wants to get caught, or they double down on their demands. But if you give them time, let's rediscuss this maybe with our teams. Now they have a safe way to say, hey, I talked it through my superior and we can actually lower it to 10% or whatever you.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. By the way, another kind of competency may not be for everyone, but if you have developed a good knowledge of your body, you may start to recognize the body sign that associate with certain emotion. Some people have their heart start beating faster, or breathing more heavily, or tension in the shoulders, or something on the stomach, or sweating palms. So when you do recognize that those body signs are coming, then it starts an early warning indicator that your emotions are getting out of control. So that's
right, and it's a good time for a break. That anecdote, Giuseppe, about the Korean divorce rate. So which I think back in days was normal, around 40%, but then the Korean government introduced this new cooling off period. So when you file for divorce, you had to wait, I think it was something like 3 months before you can push through with your divorce application. And as a result of that cooling off mandatory period, the divorce rate dropped by 5%. Right? So a lot of these divorces were really driven out of temporary anger more than sort of long-term dissatisfaction.
excellent. I didn't know that. Fantastic. By the way, we do have a number of questions that are coming through. So that how about taking a couple of questions from the audience? Just as other people may come with question, I want to remind you about our next LinkedIn Live event. If you're a regular, that we are seizing everyday negotiation opportunities is coming up on the 10th of November at 5 o'clock. It's a bit of a different time. Susanne was the negotiation professor at IMD in Lausanne. Now she's teaching negotiation at George Mason in the US. So we choose a timing which was more convenient for her. Seizing everyday negotiation opportunities. It is based on a Harvard Business Review article that Susanne wrote on this topic. So you may want to already sign up for this event. You find the link on the chat, and that may give you some more insight. So let's look at the question from the audience. I think we already answered this one: how not to get angry or nervous during a negotiation. How not to get angry or nervous during a negotiation. We already addressed this one. Then we have a comment from Vlad. My advice is to focus on goals. Yeah, absolutely. Then Aber is going a bit far, a bit away from the topic. What's the best topic for negotiating for a job offer? I think that's not the topic of this LinkedIn Live. Aber, although, there is a hint that Jordi already gave, which is, preparation and role play will certainly help you to manage your anxiety so that you're going to increase your chance of success. You're going to anticipate some of the challenges that you may face and how you're going to deal. I think that's something that is valuable. I don't know, Jordi, if you want to add.
Prepare for things going wrong. Prepare what you'll say when they say no, or when they give you an aggressive or unpleasant response. would
Yeah,
be an advice. Don't
absolutely.
expect things to go well.
Exactly. And by the way, Jordi, what if the other party is highly emotional?
Right. Yes. So dealing with your own emotion, fine, but often, their emotion is the problem. So I was reading a very, very interesting sort of review article on how you get terrorists to talk. Right. So think about the most emotional kind of negotiation out there. You have someone that has planted a bomb, got caught, someone that might be willing to die for the cause. How do you get them to talk? And it turns out that the most efficient strategy is not to the aggressive way you see in movies, right? It's not to torture a terrorist. If you torture a terrorist, they'll talk, but they'll give you anything and not very useful information. It's actually to use active listening. And, this is like top-notch research in counterterrorism. And the conclusion is the best way you can get someone to talk and tell you where the bomb is by asking open-ended questions and listening actively and with empathy. And it's the same if you look at the kind of strategies that get, for example, drug addicts to change. These are very tough conversations. How do you get someone who's addicted to change? The reward and the stick works a little bit in the short term, but the long term is, again, active, empathetic listening. And so the best thing you can do when someone is being, angry or very emotional is actually not to say anything and to listen first. Really was the listen was the goal of understanding what's going on, for them. Not was the goal of what am I going to reply. No, let me try to understand exactly what you're going through. That's the goal. And then you want to show that you're listening by using active listening techniques. So what are these active empathetic listening techniques that you can use? I like the acronym I like to use to remember them is WORD, like, the typing software. So imagine that you're like in the typing software, you have all the things that they said, and you're going to sort of edit them and reflect them back. So the first thing you can do is W, that stands for word, one word. It's just to select one word from whatever they just said and say it back with a question mark. Now the key here is not to pick, like any random word, but to pick the word that you think is the most important or that you want more information on, right? So Giuseppe, your girlfriend says, sorry, Giuseppe, I don't think it's the right time to move in together. I like the way things are right now. Can imagine it sort of CH, right? You would repeat one word and you would say, right time, things are perfect. Question. It's one word or a few words, right? But it's the idea. Like you just isolate one thing and your question mark. The second technique that you can use is on the one hand, on the other hand. So that's the O in word. And so that was to create a dichotomy in what the person is saying. So maybe Giuseppe, you're a client, you're really unhappy with the service that I provided to you. You think we have a fair price. You tell me, okay, your price was correct, but this is really crappy service that you gave us. Then I would create a dichotomy and say, okay, so it sounds like on the one hand, you're satisfied with our pricing, but on the other hand, the quality of the service you received is not living up to your expectations. You create a dichotomy in the whole laundry list that I just gave you. Now, the key here is that whatever is going to come after, on the other hand, is typically the thing that the person is going to talk about more. And so you want to be tactical by reframing things. If you want them to focus more on like the positive sides of things, then you would probably put it last.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
The last one, the R stands for rephrase. Yes. So rephrasing, we all I think about it when we think about active listening. It's really hard to do because it's hard, I think, to rephrase what the person just said without adding judgment or moralize or diminish in any way what they're saying or adding your opinion. It's incredibly hard just to sort of say, hey, here's what I'm understanding. This. Did I get it right? But if you get it right, it really helps people to calm down. And the last technique I like to use is the D in word for detect the sort of underlying values. So very often, people might tell you a lot of negative things, and rather than assuming that they're bad people, I like to think about, okay, what's the positive intent? Like, what's the nice thing behind it? And I would say, look, it sounds like ... is very important to you. Okay? That's not what they say. They're just angry, or they think you're not fair. So it sounds like fairness is very important to you, or whatever the positive value behind it, and just highlight it. So these are four small active listening techniques you can use.
Fantastic.
And yeah.
No, go ahead. Go.
And I would say that, one last one is that you want to acknowledge what the person is going through. And so, one is listen. The other one is like show you're listening by using active listening to guide the conversation. And the third part of active listening, empathetic listening, is to show empathy. And so I would say, like, label people's feelings. It works the same way it works for you. So I would say, it sounds like you're annoyed. It looks like you're feeling very disappointed. And then silence, right? Don't just label, and you let them. If you got it wrong, it's the wrong emotion, they will tell you. And if you get it right, it helps them deal with their emotion.
Yeah, fantastic. By the way, we have a comment here, an interesting comment from Ron. Getting emotion on purpose, tactically during a negotiation. Does it work? And how to know to back off a bit after delivering an emotional response?
So it does work in the kind of distributive negotiation, one-off sale, things like that. There's research showing that angry negotiators tend to get more. They get lower counter offers and things like that. So you can use it tactically, but in most negotiations where you have an ongoing relationship with the party, or there's more than just like one issue, and there's value to be created by being creative, actually it hurts the negotiation quite a bit.
Yeah. And by the way, sorry, if I may, Jordi, I also want to add that this, all the advice that we heard from Jordi so far, active listening, question, acknowledging, paraphrasing, apologizing if you made a mistake, whatever, this works when we are dealing with genuine anger. Mm-hmm. Now, when it's tactical anger, this may backfire, because if people are using those kind of emotion as a technique, and you show up as apologizing and listening and acknowledging their emotion, then it may be perceived as weak, and then they may end up even more aggressive with you. So just I think an element that you want to keep in mind is recognize whether it's a genuine anger that you're dealing with, or whether it's a tactical anger that you're dealing with.
Right, but I would draw a distinction between listening and like being weak and apologetic and things like that. To me, it's very different. It's I listen to what you're going through, and I'm going to repeat it. I'm going to ask targeted questions to guide the conversation and label your feelings. But I'm never saying like, I agree with you that that you should feel that way, and I'm going to say like, it looks like you're angry, but I'm not saying you're right to be angry, and I'm going to give you a lot of value so you're not angry at me anymore. So that's very different, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think even if they're faking anger in that sense, you don't have much risk when you use these tactics. But we can
If
debate
you're
that.
questioning and listening, then you don't take much risk. If you're more into apologizing, then
Exactly.
of course that's where the problem is. Yeah, absolutely. Listen,
There's one research trick I wanted to share with you, Giuseppe. It's really recent research we've been conducting in the lab, also on like what can you do if you think they're not going to like what you're gonna ask, right? So they don't get angry. And one strategy that we thought we tested and found was useful is to give people trigger warning and say like, look, you're probably going to think, I'm being dishonest and unfair. Here's my offer, right? So rather than having them like, react to your offer by saying that you're dishonest and unfair, you actually say like, this is probably going to happen. We're not entirely sure why they're so effective right now, these trigger warnings, but we observe in our negotiation that if you're going for an aggressive offer, these trigger warnings actually reduce the risk of impasse. It's not that you're going to get what you want, that extreme number, that anchor, but at least people are less likely to walk away and slam the door at you.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting conclusion. I mean, it's exciting topic, but we're really running. Our time is running. Maybe let's go with one last question. I mean, what other advice would you give to our audience when dealing with difficult conversations? I think.
So a general advice that I find, and that is backed up by research and I find useful, is that the observation that most people don't like to be told what to do. So I'm thinking about all kinds of difficult conversation. You have your teenage son that doesn't want to clean up, his room, and you have difficult conversation with your partner or with colleagues. They're not getting the job done and so forth. It's tempting to come up with solutions for people and say, look, I'm not happy. This is what I'd like you to do. But it's often more effective to let people come up with their own solution because they're more likely to implement it. So I'm a big fan of questions, after I've listened to their emotion, reframe and things like that, and say like, okay, how do we move forward? Or it looks like you might have an idea about the next step, things like that, and let them come up with the solution. It's often much more efficient. There's actually a meta-analysis, so it's a study of study, a conclusion of hundreds of studies that show that if you end up a request by, but feel free to say no, people are twice more likely to say yes, right? It's the same idea. If you give people the freedom, like it feels like it's coming from them, they're more likely to stick with whatever they came up with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it reminds me something that the French philosopher Blaise Pascal already said in 17th century, and it remains relevant today, is people are more convinced by the things they discover themselves, by the things that they're told by others. So in that respect, rather than coming up with your solution, with your arguments, with your facts, ask a question and let them come up with the best solution. Yeah,
absolutely.
Jordi, it was a great pleasure to have the discussion. Thank you also for sharing, some of the very latest research on this topic. It was certainly enriching for our audience and for the people that follow this channel. Then I remind you that the next event, the 10th of November at 5 o'clock, we will be welcoming an American professor, seizing everyday negotiation opportunities. Susanne de Yanas will be with us and give us some new perspective on negotiation. And all the very best to you all. And Jordi, thanks again for
thank you, everybody.
Very rich insight. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.